Hello, and welcome to this video exploring the theology of Andrew Shanks and how it may speak into the question of mission, reframing it in the light of his focus on truth as openness, which seeks to create the solidarity of the shaken. The first thing to emphasize, as many missiologists do, is that mission is not, first of all, the mission of the church, but is God's mission, God who has a missional, purposive God. And so we should ask, who is this God? And for Shanks, it is the God of perfect truth-as-openness. That is, graciously, hospitably, empathetically, lovingly open to reality in all its awkwardness, diversity, pain, and potential. The God who has a mission is not closed to creation, but very much open to it in all its fullness, and that is the scandal of the gospel. So what are the purposes of God? What is the goal of this mission of this God? Again, the goal is not the church, but what Jesus called the kingdom, or the reign of God, where God's will is done on earth as in heaven. And Shanks calls this kingdom the solidarity of the shaken, where a solidarity of the greatest possible variety of people are joined together in response to the moral demands of reality. And he also calls it holy anarchy, because the key feature of this solidarity is that no one gets to dominate over others, and people don't get to dominate the earth either. Because the love of God is the opposite of domination. Fullness of life, fullness of solidarity, fullness of life for all creation flows from such neighbour love, such hospitality, such generosity of spirit. The goal of mission is marked by such things. What then is the role of the church? As mission thinkers have identified for some time, there is a threefold role for the church. To be a sign of the kingdom, discerning it, declaring it, pointing to it, celebrating it, without claiming to be it. To be a foretaste or a sacrament of the kingdom, so embodying it in our corporate life, even if only partially, imperfectly, still enough for people to get a flavour of what it is meant to be. And to be an agent of the kingdom, working for it, furthering it. So the church is a sign, a foretaste, and an agent of the solidarity of the shaken, or holy anarchy, on earth as in heaven. This mission of God is sometimes called the Missio Dei, the mission of God in Latin, to give it extra gravitas. And if we think about the threefold role of the church in this Missio Dei, we can think of it in these terms in the light of Shanks's warnings against three dishonesties, the psychological, ideological and political structures which impede the progress of the solidarity of the shaken. Though here I'm switching the order of them a little. Because first, let's think of faithfulness, being faithful to Christ, faithful to the gospel, which is all about a concern with our central identity, who we are as Christian people. But to do this reflection and to be faithful in such a way as not to disown parts of our story. Because one dishonesty is the temptation to cut ourselves off from the fullness of who we are, to disown messy parts of our history, to tidy things up and present ourselves as righteous and innocent. So Shanks reminds us that to be faithful to Christ in our mission involves some confession, recognition that we're not the fullness of who we are called to be, and that we need to allow room for the mess, for awkward diversity and hypocrisy of Christian community. Because it is good news to be a community which does not brush issues under the carpet, but learns and relearns how to be community. That is a goal of mission. Secondly, another aspect of the mission of God is to create communities which learn how to engage with other communities. Because even though we are conditioned by a second dishonesty, banality, unthinkingly going with the flow of our own correctness, our own worldview and boundaries and codes, there is always truth potential beyond us. So it is vital that communities learn to be hospitable to other communities, not just tolerating them, but daring to receive from them, to learn from them, to allow them to help us understand reality more fully, and to grow to be as neighbourly as possible. This is a goal of mission. And thirdly, While we live in a world of vested interests, where we are manipulated to toe the line in the cause of preserving those vested interests, cutting us off from other possible futures marked by justice, equality, freedom, it is central to our mission to expose those systems of domination and division, and to work for the greatest possible solidarity in partnership with others who also seek such transformation. This, too, is a goal of mission. So there may be those three different dynamics in mission: to be faithful to our own story without cutting ourselves off from varied versions of it, to be hospitable to those who are different, and to generate the greatest possible solidarity in defiance of systems of domination. But if we pause for a moment at that first role, faithfulness, because no doubt it can be heard in different ways. For some, it will be very much about being faithful to particular doctrines and morals, to understanding things this way, which Shanks would say can be conditioned by attachment to truth as correctness. Whereas if we remember that the higher truth is what cannot be contained by particular forms of words, but is about God's receptivity, God's hospitality, God's graciousness, well then, it's not simply about possessing the right coloured bricks in our faith, the right collection of doctrinal ideas, but is about seeing those features of our faith as evoking in us receptivity and neighbourliness towards others. After all, the definitive feature, which is graciousness, is not bounded, but is about relating with those who differ or who do not fit. It is not about being faithful to church ideology, but to xenophilia, love for that which is strange, the stranger, in whom we encounter God's very own presence. Even if we understand faith or faithfulness in terms of loyalty, as it was understood in the early centuries of the church, it is not a loyalty to a tribe, but loyalty to Christ, who transgresses the boundaries between tribes, who demonstrates hospitable love to all kinds of others. So to be faithful to our tradition, faithful to Christ, faithful to the gospel, is not about gathering together the right coloured bricks of ideas. These are the things that set us apart from them. Rather, it's about having those bricks and understanding that they open us up to others. It's about being xenophile, loving that which is strange, and building connections with those who are different. Perhaps we can think of this approach to mission in terms of the famous verse from Micah, "What does the Lord require of us?" But here with a slight change in terms of who this Lord is, but perfect truth as openness. So what does perfect truth as openness require of us, but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God? And it's arguable that this can reflect what we have been saying. Addressing the dishonesty of manipulation, the power of systems which seduce us to toe the line of current injustices, involves acting as agents of God's kingdom, or here, doing justice. Addressing the dishonesty of banality, of being closed to those beyond us, involves being a sign of the kingdom, learning to discern and point out and declare and celebrate wherever God's kingdom is alive, and so to love kindness, xenophilia, loving beyond borders. And addressing the dishonesty of disowning, of cutting ourselves off from some of our mess and muddle and inconsistencies, involves learning how to be a foretaste of the kingdom, a community which aims to embody the solidarity of the shaken, a solidarity of all sorts, all stories, all experiences, and so walking humbly rather than boastfully. So returning to the triangle, faithfulness is about humility, the calling of the church to embody truth as openness, even partially, recognizing that this calls the church to attend to the wholeness of who it is, not some edited or polished or tidied up version, but gloriously holding the wholeness of who we are in common. And to demonstrate loving kindness is to be hospitable, breaking open our banalities, our herd mentalities, our unthinking or willful resistance to the stranger, discerning the demands of truth as openness wherever they are. And to further the cause of truth-as-openness in the politics of the world, its structures, its power dynamics, is to expose and confront and transform systems of manipulation and domination, acting justly, both outside of the church and also within. Perhaps these words from Jeremiah capture the vocation, not to boast, neither of wisdom, nor might, nor wealth, except in this, that we understand that God acts with steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth, things that God delights in. And perhaps Jesus' words to the man who cannot hear or speak are also significant, urging us to ephatha, meaning be opened to see the reality of what is going on, opened to speak truth to power, opened to declare God's alternative, the solidarity of the shaken, on earth as it is in heaven. But that raises interesting questions, because there are other voices, other impulses, seemingly other callings, even within Scripture, which does not always say, be opened, but at other times seems to call for clear boundaries, clear power dynamics, even sometimes seeks to justify violence. So what are we to make of those other voices, especially if we're considering our mission in the light of God's mission? Well, Shanks' approach would be this, to say that Scripture itself bears witness to the civil war, the tension which unatonement consists of, as though religious communities in their writings sometimes genuinely believe that they are being called to build walls, to shut out, even to justify the sacrifice of certain groups, while at other times they are shaken open. So their sacred texts bear witness to this conflict, and how we interpret those texts also bears witness to this conflict. And even though Shanks is arguing that the higher impulse is to be shaken open in response to God's truth as openness, that never means we should ignore the uncomfortable texts or edit them out, because it instead prompts us to learn to understand where such voices come from, how it is that communities sometimes need to build walls, even if the consequences will always be problematic down the road. And so Shanks gives us this particular lens for interpreting Scripture, whether texts help to open us up or to close us down, suggesting that this lens itself comes from Scripture, as indicated in the ministry of Jesus. But of course, this approach will prompt and provoke debate. Ultimately, mission is God's, the God who is truth as openness, which evokes in us the impulse towards truth as openness. This calls on us to build community shaped by it, so it can never be a neat and tidy community, but one which learns to live well with its diversity of voices, its awkwardness and hypocrisy. It calls on us, too, to engage constructively, lovingly, hospitably with other communities, since they may teach us about reality. And it calls on us to expose and transform all systems of domination. This is enough to be getting on with. So be opened to the challenge.